Another focus in the run-up to the Olympics, Beijing's strict preventive measures amid the pandemic. Belgium skeleton racer Kim Milesman has finally entered the Olympic villages. The 25-year-old Olympian tested positive for the CCP virus, which causes COVID-19, upon her arrival in Beijing. She was taken to isolate and had to do several tests before getting permission to enter the Olympic village. But even after testing negative, she was not immediately taken to the Olympic Village. Instead, she was moved to another facility by ambulance for 7 days of isolation. She tearfully shared about her experience on Instagram.
Obviously, this is very hard for me. So I ask you all to give me some time to consider my next steps, because I'm not sure I can handle 14 more days and the Olympic competition while being in this isolation.
Belgian Olympic officials, as well as International Olympic Committee or IOC, later intervened. Milesman updated fans on her situation Wednesday, saying she was moved to an isolation wing inside one of the Olympic villages. She said she felt safe and would be better able to train.
It seems like the video and especially also the efforts of my Olympic committee have really paid off.
IOC spokesman Christian Klauer wrote on Twitter that he was relieved to learn about Milesman's update. Olive Spaal, Belgium's head of Mission Beijing 2022, said the team's priority was getting Milesman to the village as quickly as possible.
We believe that in this approach to COVID measures, the athlete must remain central.
Official training for women's skeleton racing starts next week, ahead of the competition starting on February 12th. Reports from Beijing are sharing first looks at the Olympics opening ceremony. Thousands of journalists from around the world worked under strict COVID-19 restrictions during the event, which kicked off Friday evening local time. Like athletes and other staff, reporters are confined to what's called the Olympic bubble or closed loop, designed to isolate them from the general population. Under those rules, journalists are only allowed to visit a limited number of sites and aren't allowed to move freely through the Chinese capital. Vicky Ivanovic, a senior reporter from Croatia's national broadcaster HRT, described the situation, saying journalists feel like they're in jail.
We feel here like we are in jail. We can't go out of the hotel, police is outside, the big fences there. I can't feel Olympic spirit. Maybe when everything starts, it will be different, but I don't know. It's really, really weird.
Early Friday morning, a reporter for Dutch public broadcaster NOS was pulled away while reporting live on the Dutch national news. He had been standing nearby Beijing's National Stadium. The Chinese man forcing them out of the area was heard speaking in a seemingly thick Beijing area accent. He told the journalist that reporting in the area was not allowed and instructed him to stay further away. The Dutch journalist attempted to report from a number of nearby locations, but shooting video there was prohibited.
Victims of the Chinese Communist Party protested outside the U.S. Capitol. This as the Beijing Olympics is starting, and some in the U.S. are called out for being complicit.
Uyghurs, Tibetans, and Hong Kongers on Thursday rallied outside the U.S. Capitol. They decry the Beijing Olympics, citing a long list of human rights abuses by the Chinese Communist Party.
This is the equivalent of the 1936 Nazi Olympics in Berlin.
Congressman Chris Smith attended the protest. He warns that Beijing will act with more impunity if its propaganda through the Olympics succeeds.
And now we have it in 2022 with an ongoing massive destruction, genocide against the Uyghurs, and everyone else is subjected to just horrible mistreatment, including torture and death. The Falun Gong, for example, are having their organs taken.
Chinese leader Xi Jinping on the same day promised a, quote, safe and splendid Olympics. But Wang Dan, a Chinese dissident and survivor of the Tiananmen Square massacre, says any promise by the CCP is not to be believed.
Traditionally, CCP is a big liar. We all know the history, so any word come out from their mouths, I will not believe it.
An activist from Hong Kong says the same. He's seen China crush the freedoms of the Hong Kongers.
So I think you're going to see the repeated pattern of China breaking its promises and only try to serve its own interests when it's needed.
Also in the spotlight are the American companies they say contribute to China's surveillance, military, and human rights abuses. This report right here, put together by the rally organizer, has a scorecard for 8 of them, including Apple, Facebook, and Intel, which is the sponsor of the Beijing Olympics.
So at some point, corporate America needs to pivot and said, mea culpa, we made a mistake. We're enabling cruelty that is just like the Nazis.
New data analysis shows that corporate sponsors of the Beijing Olympics spent more than $30 million lobbying Washington in 2021.
FBI Chief Christopher Wray renewed his warning about the threat from the Chinese Communist Party. He's calling it more damaging than ever.
FBI Director Christopher Wray warns Beijing's aggression toward democratic countries is reaching a new level, calling it more brazen and damaging than ever before.
I do want to be clear that the Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party pose the threat we're focused on countering, not the Chinese people and certainly not Chinese Americans who are themselves frequently victims of the Chinese government's lawless aggression.
He gave the speech at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library. Wray accuses Beijing of stealing information and harming a wide range of U.S. industries. As for how that's known, he cited the Bureau's counterintelligence activities.
So much so that, as you heard, we're constantly opening new cases to counter their intelligence operations, about every 12 hours or so.
Wray notes that Chinese state-backed hackers have stolen staggering amounts of personal and corporate data, more than all other countries combined, though Beijing has repeatedly rejected those accusations.
When we tally up what we see in our investigations, over 2,000 of which are focused on the Chinese government trying to steal our information and technology, there is just no country that presents a broader threat to our ideas, our innovation, and our economic security than China.
A recent investigation by the U.S. International Trade Commission offers a glimpse into the high-level censorship seen in China. The report says the Chinese regime uses a mix of technical and non-technical tools to control the flow of information, all in the service of its political agenda. Measures include website blocking, keyword filtering, and throttling. U.S. lawmakers have called for fighting back using trade tools.
Is China really about to invade Taiwan? Those fears may seem justified amid Beijing's threatening hints, fighter jet flyovers, and Ukraine-Russia tensions. But a former Chinese army official says the Communist Party's internal struggles are hindering its ability to take Taiwan by force.
The island of Taiwan is preparing for a possible invasion from the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, but according to a formal Chinese military official, such fear is unnecessary.
The CCP is unlikely to take advantage of this opportunity to invade Taiwan, especially at this time in 2022.
Yao currently lives in the U.S. He says that lack of opportunity is all because of the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics. And on top of that, Yao says Chinese leader Xi Jinping is busy focusing on the 20th Communist Party Congress this year. Yao adds that Xi doesn't want to pick a fight, nor does he want a possible Russia-Ukraine conflict to spark. A major altercation between them could impact China too. The possibility of China waging war on Taiwan has persisted for years, but Yao adds that based on his knowledge, Beijing's senior military officers are no longer falling in line.
One, there was no chance of winning the battle against Taiwan. If so, it would be the end of the CCP and the regime would lose control of China. Two, if we lose, not only will many people die, but China's military power will be greatly weakened.
That's according to internal letters Yao received from China's army.
The joint U.S. and Japan forces could destroy most of China's naval and air forces, which would be a huge loss. Secondly, how would a soldier who has lost a battle be viewed by society? As you can imagine, they would be very embarrassed. So there are a lot of rumors within the army, which have also spread to Xi Jinping's ears.
But why is the Chinese military so worried? Yao says since 2018, the military has analyzed possible scenarios for war with the island. all of them lead to one conclusion. That is, the war cannot be won, especially with the US and Japan getting involved. Still, Yao says Chinese leader Xi will still stick with the tough rhetoric about conquering Taiwan by force, but only to boost his chances of staying in power for another term.
Thousands of cameras linked to China's Communist Party's repression of ethnic minorities are in use across the UK. Research by campaign group Big Brother Watch finds Hikvision and Dahua cameras are in use in our schools, police forces, hospitals, and public buildings. This comes after an independent tribunal ruled at the end of last year that the Chinese regime is guilty of genocide against the Uyghurs in Xinjiang. Here's NTD's Jane Werrell with this report.
An investigation reveals more than 60% of UK public bodies operate Chinese Communist Party-linked surveillance cameras. Civil liberties group Big Brother Watch analysed data from thousands of Freedom of Information requests. They found that 3 out of 5 schools use Hikvision or Dahua equipment. These companies are accused of playing a role in the repression of Uyghurs in Xinjiang, with their cameras having the capability to racially profile individuals walking past them. In addition, 31% of police forces use the technology, as well as more than half of NHS trusts. The Foreign Affairs Committee has recommended that Hikvision and Dahua cameras be banned in the UK, saying in a 2021 report, "We recommend that the government prohibits organisations and individuals in the UK from doing business with any companies known to be associated with the Xinjiang atrocities." At the end of last year, a tribunal ruled the Chinese regime guilty of genocide. In response to a question from NTD at the tribunal, Lord Alton spoke of efforts to stop the use of such cameras.
I moved an amendment to the Telecommunications Act so that where in another jurisdiction of a Five Eyes country, and I was thinking particularly here of the United States, had banned a company on the grounds of evidence that it had seen of its involvement in the surveillance state in Xinjiang, then we would be required to review their status in the United Kingdom as well. That was not passed, but I still believe it would be the right thing to do. Ministers said that they were with it in spirit. Well, they should now be with it in practice and should be reviewing companies like Hikvision.
The government hasn't responded in time for deadline. The Big Brother Watch report shows that almost 3/4 of UK local authorities use Chinese-made CCTV. But Tower Hamlets Council, where the Chinese embassy plans to relocate, has a different view and says they don't use Chinese CCTV cameras because of the technology's role in suppressing minorities. Jane Werrell, NTD News, London.